From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
A bizarre new twist in the 38 Studio saga is putting the state's top prosecutor at odds with the head of the state police. Plus, why Rhode Island is joining other states in fighting President Trump's controversial immigration order. Our guest this week on Newsmakers, Attorney General Peter Kilmartin. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Joining me on the program, as always, from WPRI.com, reporter Ted Nesi. General, it's really good to have you back on the show. Thanks for joining us.
Made it through the snow.
Made it through the snow. Snow blowing for 2.5 hours, like almost every other Rhode Islander.
How'd Mayor Grebian do with the plowing?
That's a good question.
Yeah, very well. No, honestly, this morning roads were good, and I came in a little early though, just to be on the safe side. And that
would have been something if you threw the mayor under the bus.
No, I wouldn't. I would never do that.
Hey, look, I want to start with 38 Studios and chat about this, because this is really why we have you initially on the program today. Ted had reached out to your press secretary immediately on Friday, and let's just review what happened on Friday. So we're taping this Friday. It was a week ago today. You issued a press release now calling the 38 Studios criminal investigation closed, but you put it at the feet of State Police Colonel Anna Sumpico. You said you wanted to review more documents of the civil case, but Sumpico said he didn't provide any evidence to reopen the case. I'm going to quote from your press release. You wrote, "For the first time, Colonel Sumpico informed me that she considered the investigation closed, that she would commit no further resources to it, and that her decision was final." Look, you've been getting a lot of pressure to release the material from the criminal investigation. And I have to tell you, the perception on this is you're throwing the state police under the bus for your own political gain.
No, well, first of all, if I were being political, I'd be the one saying, release everything. Let me go ask the presiding justice to open the grand jury.
Like the governor is.
Like the governor and so many others. But those who are silent on it, like Nikki Kukas, who was the Roger Williams professor, knows that I'm doing the right thing. I've talked to other attorneys general. They're like, "You're not going to do that, are you?" What we have here, and I brought something, because in this, by the way, is a headline in relation to Trump and the executive order. We are still a nation of laws. That's what I have to do. My sworn job, and I've said it to you folks before, I'm sure, on this show. I have a book right here. It's this thick, Court Rules. There's 47 titles in the general laws. That's my 10 commandments. When I make decisions, the first place I need to go is to those books and say, what are the rules? What do I have to abide by? And those rules I didn't make up. They've been in statute and on the books in some cases for decades, especially regarding grand jury and otherwise. The reason for that is we have a criminal system. And you can unintentionally violate that system by going and making these exceptions. One of the best examples of that is Director Comey of the FBI. When he said, okay, the Clinton email scandal is over, we're going to release documents, the Clinton people were happy, the Trump people were mad. Well, lo and behold, a couple of months later, there were more documents. Now they have to reopen it, and now the Trump people are happy and the Clinton people are mad. Well, you know what? Go to the rule book.
No,
play by the rules.
That's the grand jury question to all this.
But that was also investigative in nature.
I understand, and look, that's been discussed a lot. You have a very strong argument, can have a chilling effect to grand jury by releasing grand jury material. The courts have to weigh that very seriously, and that's going to happen. But what you did last Friday wasn't about necessarily the grand jury. It was about the question of whether or not this bizarre, is the case closed, or is it open but inactive? Right. You held a press conference.
I'm sorry.
Last July, announcing no criminal charges. That's case closed to a lot of people. And then when you started facing pressure about the question of whether it's closed or open, you put this press release out and you say this is on Anna Sumpico, the Colonel of the State Police.
There's a couple of alternative facts in there. Let me just fill you in on part of that. When then Colonel O'Donnell and I did that, it was, listen, we're at a standstill. The public deserves a right to know that we're at a standstill. We had gone through grand jury, reviewed documents after the grand jury, and there was nothing further coming in. Our full intention was, at the appropriate time, there would be triggers that would cause the reopening. One of those triggers being the final settlement of all
Why is
the
that a
civil
trigger?
case. Because what happened, if you recall from that press conference on that day, I made a real point. I made a real point of saying that these are two independent cases, i.e. the civil case and the criminal case. So I don't have access to those, all of those civil documents.
That's not true.
I don't have access to all of them.
You absolutely do have access to those.
Well, first of all, I wanted to do it in the legal process, getting subpoenas and go through the court legally. Because if we have a prosecution, I want everybody to say he followed, again, all of the rules. So I wanted to get those subpoenaed in, have the state police look at it. There's an old saying, on the road to truth, there's only two mistakes you can make. One, not starting. Two, not going all the way. And I know the colonel's, and I respect the colonel, and I know the colonel's position was, look, there are thousands of pages there, I don't have the resources, but you know something? I'll bring you back again to another case, Gordon Fox. There were tens of thousands of lines in those documents when those were going through. One line. Just one line is what led to those bribery charges. So you don't know until you do the review. She unequivocally stated to me, I'm not going to do the review. I consider the case closed unless you can bring me something else. She did say that. But how can I bring her something else when we can't have the documents to look at?
Well, if the governor gets the documents released, you can go through them.
But here's the problem. Again, and this gets back to, again, the role of the prosecutor. And this is why I think the founding people in this state were wise to have an independent governor and an independent AG. I need to look at this, as I stated, from a legal perspective. So, for instance, you both are very well familiar with cold cases. We just had a prosecution a couple of months ago of a 20-year-old cold case. We had the Bobby Oliveira murder, 1978. A brand new grand jury was convened on that case 2 years ago. What if, in the interest of public interest, it was at the time a high-profile shooting in a housing project, and we said, okay, we had a grand jury. There was nothing that came out of the grand jury, just like 38 Studios. Let's release the documents. Let's release the investigation.
What are you talking? That happens all the time. We get cold case documents and file reports on it, and do stories about murders that happened 20 years ago. Because
you don't get grand jury documents.
Because the case, okay, fine, but you're not giving us non-grand jury documents either. So if we want to step out of that prison,
by the
we can
way,
do that.
but the state police are in the possession of most of those documents. My concern is, let's say something comes out, okay, and you know, we were. The hope was we were also. It's not just about documents. We were hoping also to compel some testimony into a new grand jury, hopefully. But now that's all come to a stall. So if the
Colonel Asumpico, you want to compel new testimony from people, but she doesn't feel like that's strong enough evidence?
She and I had a conversation, I don't know, 6 or 8 weeks ago, and that laid out strategy. She seemed on board with that. The first I heard otherwise was last Thursday. So now it's the first time, and believe me, I asked the prosecutors, have you ever heard of a case, especially when, and you're right, this is a big case, this is one of big public interest, all the more reason in my mind to really play it straight, play by the rules, follow those law books and those court rules, and go even the extra mile. We were just trying to go where we were hoping to go. So we were prepared to do that. Once she said, no, I consider it closed, it would be like, we need them to investigate. If something, Lord forbid, came out and it could have led to something criminal, now we're going to have people in, they're going to say, well, I remember that, I heard that on the news, and prejudge a case, and then you get into pretrial publicities.
Yes or no, you can reopen a closed case. Yes or no?
Not without the cooperation of the state police.
But philosophically speaking, if a case is closed, you get no new evidence, you can reopen it, correct?
Because she said she'd reopen it if evidence comes out.
But if you release everything we are in possession of, the possibility exists that gets tainted, and it makes the job of the prosecutor that much harder down the line. And that's the point.
Have you talked to Colonel Asumpico since you had the dueling press releases?
No, we haven't.
You said in your news release, you said that civil suit documents that have come out have, quote, already told the public much of the story of the 38 series legislation and loan process. When you say much of the story, what's left that we don't know?
I don't know. I don't have the documents.
So there's nothing in the documents you've seen in the grand jury proceedings and in the investigation that tells anything we don't know already?
Overall, I would say most of the general story is known, that this was a bad business decision, it was bad politics, but at this stage of the game, based on everything that we've seen and reviewed, that does not rise to the level of criminality.
As we were coming into the studio today, the governor put out a press release and announced the state police, it was, we should point out, taping on a Friday, settlement approved in the civil case. So they put out a release and said the state police are now reviewing their non-grand jury documents from the case for release. Do you plan to do the same review and segregate out non-grand jury documents like the state police are?
Again, my position is that nothing should be released until, at a minimum, until the statute of limitations is up in a couple of years.
It's
Number
not just
one.
grand jury.
Number two, I don't know how the state police can make that determination because they're not necessarily in the grand jury. Pat Youngs was the one person who's been part of every grand jury. So it's going to be hard for them to segregate out whatever is grand jury or isn't.
How can there be a statute of limitations when there's no charge?
Because the general feeling is on this that it's not a murder charge, it's not a capital case, which has no statute of limitations. So in Rhode Island, this is financial in nature, we all know that. In Rhode Island, most financial crimes have a statute of limitations of 10 years. What I honestly think should be done, and even this I have angst about, but if we're gonna go down a road, do it like a congressional hearing, like what they did with Hillary Clinton on the emails. Do an investigation into the political process, how it happened, who made the decisions, and then fix the system.
Interesting. So the governor, during her campaign, called for an independent investigation. That was during our debate, actually. She has since pulled back on that. Do you think there should be an independent investigation, or I mean, do you agree?
Independent what? Criminal investigation?
No, independent investigation.
Like the one into RISD.
The RISD, right.
Again, I have some angst on it, obviously, in case anything criminal. If we got that one line out of tens of thousands of lines that led to a bribery charge, like in Gordon's case, as I mentioned, I have angst about it. But I do think a proper forum would be a legislative forum where the mistakes were made, and the EDC board in the governor's office, being the chair of it at the time, let's review that and let's ensure that all of the safeguards, and it's my understanding some safeguards have been put in place since then, but let's make sure it doesn't happen again. I've been around the state long enough where you see these cycles of these big cases. I can remember in 1985, my first mortgage, I got through RISD. It was at 9.95%. Everybody's, oh my goodness, you got under 10. Well, RISD, not RISD, the Rhode Island Housing and Mortgage Finance Corporation had a whole investigation about it. There were no mortgages being set. I got one of the first ones, and I had to give over more personal documents. You know, thankfully I was only 23 at the time, so there weren't a lot of them. But my point was, we periodically run through these issues, RISD being the next one, and now this, where the structures of government fail us.
Here's the issue. Just one sec. Here's the issue that I have with this. You want to review all the tens of thousands of pages. I've been to Max Wistow's office. I've seen those boxes. You're right. There are a lot of documents.
And by the way, I will say this. You know, I am confident that had Max or his team come across something that now mind you, they're civil attorneys, but had they thought was criminal, maybe they would have given that over.
That's great.
But let's all I want to do is match it all up and make sure we're on solid ground.
You knew those documents existed in July. Why did you hold a press conference then?
Because, to the point, here's what happened in July. You mean at the press conference time? Here's what happened at that time. the governor was extremely concerned. The colonel and I were ready to go with the press conference, okay? We're ready to go and say, look, we're at a standstill. The public deserves to know that. Rather than us going out and being disingenuous saying it's active and ongoing, we knew at that point it wasn't. We were ready to move forward, and the governor's staff and the governor, who was, I think, at the DNC at the time, reached out and said, we're close on a settlement. Can you hold off? We don't want it to impact that. So that's why we held off that, and the fact that anything after that, the colonel and I, our schedules really didn't sync up. So we were very cognizant that we did not want to do anything to impact any of those civil negotiations that were ongoing.
That explains why you held the press conference at that time. But why would you hold it at all if you want to review more documents?
Because we were, think back to what we said. We said, folks, we are at a standstill. But we consider it.
When did you hit the standstill?
After we had the last grand jury, our prosecutors, the state police, were still going over things. Just because a grand jury ends doesn't mean that you don't necessarily continue working.
Sure.
And we knew we were pretty close to that a couple of months early, and then we just went ahead with it.
But then why was there only like 45 minutes notice about that news conference if it had been a months of discussion?
Because, as I said, we were prepared to go a few days before. And the hope from the governor's office, and I understand it, was, look, we have a settlement, we don't want this to influence. And my position was, number one, this in no way should or could influence it, because the two are two different tracks, they're unrelated, there's no cross-contamination, if you will. And then by that point, so many people knew, my concern as the prosecutor was so many people know that we were prepared to go. I didn't want the perception that, oh, maybe they held back so they wouldn't do criminal charges and we could get a settlement. So, and while that would be a totally false perception, I believe it was a real perception.
We are so overdue for a break. Yeah. But, let me just ask you a house.
I'm sorry.
No.
It's an
important topic.
And it's an important topic.
So,
that's why I'm here.
A house cleaning question, and we appreciate it. A house cleaning question. As in that release that I referenced as we were walking into the studio, the governor, and you expect this, she's going to go into court. She says now in the release she's going to go into court early next week and ask for the grand jury materials to be released. We know you oppose it. Just from a X's and O's standpoint, what do you do? Do you go into court, file a motion opposing that?
First, I want to see what they do, and then believe me, our civil division has looked at several angles. Depending on what they do, depends on what our reaction will be. But more likely than not, will play out in a court.
You said something interesting during the interview. You said that the documents are sort of entangled with each other, the non-grand jury and the grand jury, and you said they better be careful because they weren't in the room. Are you going to pick up the phone and call Anna Sumpico and ask her not to release or do that review?
I believe, and by the way, if it weren't for the fact that I have those rules and playbooks to go by, I don't have a problem with people seeing things. But this is in the legal context. Okay, and that's the view as an attorney general. That's what I was elected to do. And I'll take the slings and arrow for doing the job I was elected to do. I do sincerely believe that both the governor and the colonel really just are hoping that this will put it behind us and move the state forward and put it behind us. And I believe that's their goal in this.
Yeah, that's interesting, because people think there's a lot they think maybe you're trying to get at the governor or something like that. No,
I believe that's their goal in this. But I still have to protect the system. We're a system of laws, and I have all of those rules to abide by. And this isn't about this case. Take this case out of it. Take the name 38 Studios out of it. This is about bad precedent for the next case down the line or the next case down the line. And it's also the good precedent for the cases that have come before this one in a judicial system that works. I have to be concerned about defendants' rights, witnesses' rights, all of those parts that make the system work.
Okay, we have to go to a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about he's fighting Donald Trump on the immigration order. We'll get into detail on that. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. To my left, WPRI.com reporter. Our guest this week is Attorney General Peter Kilmartin. Ted?
Well, AG, we ate a lot of time up on 38, so we got to be succinct on this. But your office has filed amicus briefs supporting the challenges to President Trump's recent executive order. Briefly, what's your chief concern with the order?
My chief concern is really about the Constitution and due process. Again, where we started, where I held it up. We are a nation of laws. And I understand if the president and Congress and frankly almost every American wants to ensure that terrorists can't come into this country and they want to do a more thorough vetting process. I understand that and I have no problem with that. But to go across the board and do it in a manner which they did by an executive order impacting thousands and thousands of immigrants, many of whom have already been vetted and who are here legally, contributing to our economy, contributing to all of the big firms out in Washington, Microsoft and others. There's a problem with process. And what really troubles me about it is, and we saw this, again, we're taping Friday. Last night, the Ninth Circuit came down with a decision saying that upholding the stay, so the executive order right now is still being stayed.
Trump lost that.
Trump lost that.
To summarize it to
right.
people, yes.
Sorry, I apologize.
That's okay. Yeah.
So it is about due process. It's about the Constitution. And what I had started to say was we are having these constitutional questions very early on in this administration. As we just discovered, I'm about 12 years older than you and more than that than you. But I remember the constitutional questions about President Nixon and presidential authority, and I think the court came down properly saying just because you have the umbrella of national security doesn't necessarily mean we get rid of our separation of powers, duties, and the role and functions of the judicial system in this country. Again, it goes back to where we started. This is a nation of laws. The actions of the president were unilateral. Candidly, I found them offensive as a prosecutor because, like I said, even on 38, you need to protect people's rights along the way.
We've seen some tough talk from other elected officials around. Mayor Lorza in particular, he's named Providence now, quote, a sanctuary city. You've actually pushed back at times on some of the other Democrats around about illegal immigration. Do you think the mayor is making the right decision or the wrong decision making Providence a sanctuary city?
Well, brief history. Back when I first came in 2011, there was a program called Secure Communities. I don't know if you recall that. And in that, I signed the state up for it where anyone, doesn't matter what their socioeconomic, ethnic, racial background was, anyone who got arrested, their prints would go to ICE, and if there was a detainer, the feds would take action. Okay? Fast forward, we've progressed from that time where detainers, as a recent case right here with Judge McConnell, we found that there's not enough probable cause with detainers, that maybe in 2009 that was a system that was appropriate, but today we're saying, no, we want a little bit more, we want to protect people's rights. I don't have a problem with that. So where we need to go is protecting people's rights, ensuring that the president doesn't act unilaterally, and move forward with
So are you comfortable with Providence being a sanctuary city?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't do that on purpose. Answer the question I wanted asked. So if being a sanctuary city means that they will not hold people for federal detainers, I am comfortable with that. If there's a federal warrant, that's a different situation.
You've done the friend of the court briefs, these amicus briefs. It's sort of a legal question, and we're running out of time here. But
that's your fault.
And you're gonna monitor other lawsuits. Can you actually file your own standalone lawsuit, or do you need a trigger for that?
We need what you would call standing. So when the executive order came down, which ironically was on a Friday, when it came down, the first impact on it across the country were ports of embarkation, Logan Airport, international airports, of which Rhode Island doesn't have one. So at first blush, it's like, well, we don't really have standing.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
But then as it progressed, obviously more cases came. And honestly, I think it has strengthened numbers when we all sign on.
So we
to
have barely a
these
minute
amicus.
left. Have to ask you about politics. Last time you were on, you did not rule out running against Governor Raimondo in next year's Democratic primary for governor. Are you considering that?
I honestly, what I am considering right now is finishing my 2 years as Attorney General, doing that job. I've tried to stay away from taints of politics for 6 years. I think I've done it pretty well, and I plan on doing that moving forward.
So that means you wouldn't run for anything? Because
No, that
if
means
you finish
I
it
haven't
out.
made any decisions regarding anything. You know, there were a lot, back when you asked me that question, there were a lot of rumors going around, and rumors are usually started by those who benefit the most, in my opinion. But that Governor Raimondo would go into a Clinton administration, and you know, maybe that would open up that seat. So we're a long way away from making those decisions.
So you could primary her?
I'm not thinking about anything except doing my job.
He is our political reporter, so
Yeah,
he's
I
going
get
to
I don't know how to write. Yeah.
I have a quick question about John Carnevale, and we have less than a minute left.
You said that a minute ago.
When this case broke, you know, a lot of lawmakers came to Ted and I and said, "Oh, that was the worst kept secret." Whatever. You served with him. Was that the rumor swirling around the General Assembly? 30 seconds that he didn't live in Providence?
The first I heard of it was when it was reported.
Okay.
Maybe in the later years, when I was already out of the assembly, it was the worst kept secret. I don't know.
All right. Well, Attorney General Peter Kilmartin, thank you very much for joining us on the program. We're
Thanks for
glad you
having
could
me.
make it in. If you missed any of it, it's on WPRI.com. For Ted Nesi, I'm Tim White. We will see you next week on Newsmakers.